So, hello and welcome to another episode of the MobyDick School. Today's episode covers the topic of ISDN trunks and how to set them up within the MobyDick. Now, before we start, I'm just going to go through a few quick bits and pieces. Last time we set up a Baronet gateway, which is sitting here on our desk now, and we pre-configured everything, and all we need to do now is just plug that in quickly, and once this light stays solid green and stops flashing, it's ready to be configured. Okay. The question is, why do we have to use a trunk at all? Every time we want to leave the MobyDick for any sort of communication, whether it be ISDN lines or a SIP carrier and so on, we need a form of communication channel, so in this case a trunk. Now, if we're going to do it via a gateway or a hardware solution like we have here, this hardware has to be pre-configured before we start setting up the actual trunk. Okay. Now, of course, if I'm talking about setting up a SIP carrier and it's not going over any hardware, of course, I can just go in and add the trunk without having any hardware configurations and just start adding the SIP carrier data into the trunk. That, of course, is fine. That works, no problem. Now, what we need to talk about is how we actually go about doing this. So, if we go into the MobyDick web user interface, and under Gateways, just to illustrate what we set up last time, we have our gateway list, and here you can see that we've got a Baronet box set up under the IP address 192.168, which is our demo network we've set up here. And last time I actually set it up so that we had the first port was already pre-configured. What we need to do now is actually start adding a trunk. Okay, so under Gateways, we go to Trunks. And then here you can see there's no trunks added at the moment, so we just simply click on Add, and then here we have the setup screen. Now what we can first look at here is we have a number of providers that we already support. If your provider or gateway is not in this list, you can of course manually set one up through the advanced IAX and SIP options. That's not a problem. For today's purposes, we are going to be using the gateway Barofix because we set up a Baronet box. So I click there, and I'm going to give it a description of some sort, quite nice and neutral one. For this one, we're just going to use provider. Okay, and this is the name that will appear on the list once it's all set up. Now we're going to set up here a prefix for incoming numbers. A lot of people ask, why do we need to do that? And simple reason being is when we receive an incoming call and it goes into, say, for example, our call lists and call registry and so on, and then we want to call that number back. In most scenarios, you have to use a prefix to dial out. So we simply add the prefix within the software when the call comes in, so that when you dial out, it's done automatically for you. You don't have to do it. Okay, so it's nice and simple, improves workflows and so on, and yeah, that's that. Now here, we also have to add the area code, okay? Now we're in Deckendorf in Germany, and the area code for Deckendorf is 0991, but of course we don't need the 0 because that's the national prefix, so I'm just going to add 991, okay? And then here, I could click next and everything's done, but what I'm going to do here is we've got a call rule assistant, and we're going to go over the call rules in a later episode because they're not exactly the most simple of things. But here, the assistant is here to help us. So, we've got a few things that we can set up. For example, the country code. As I said, we're in Germany, so I'm using the 49. But if I was in United Kingdom, for example, it'd be 44. If I was in Bahrain, 973. But yeah, here we go. We've got the 49. Now the national code, as I talked about earlier, is 0. And then here we have our originating number. Now the originating number is quite important to understand. It's basically the base of your telephone number. So you have your national code, you have your area code, and then you have your telephone number with the extension. The originating number is the bit in the middle between the area code and your extension numbers. Okay, so for our particular setup today, we've got our test one here, which is 296670. Now, the 0 on the end is a little bit of an annoyance on this particular scenario because normally most extensions for your switchboard or front desk would be the 0. So in this particular scenario, if you needed to get hold of our front desk, you'd have to add another 0 on there. So it'd be 2966700, which is a bit inconvenient, but for our setup, it's fine. Okay, now we have to enter the number of extension digits. Okay, so when you get your package from the telecom, you will be provided with a package that comes with extension numbers, and whether that be a 2-digit extension or a 3-digit extension, and so on and so on. We need to tell the system how many digits our extension numbers actually have. So in this particular scenario, we've got 2. Okay, and that's used as a placeholder for the call rules and so on and so on. Now here we have an extension for the central, so switchboard. We've only got myself as a user set up here and one telephone linked into it, so we're going to use my extension, which is the 100. Okay, we click next, and here we have an overview screen of everything we have just configured. The important thing to do here is you see connected to, it says not connected at the moment. It's not connected to our box. We need to set it up and connect it to our box here. Simple drop-down list, done. Okay, we press save, and then we can apply these settings. Now, while we're waiting for everything to restart and so on, I'm going to give you a brief explanation about the call rules. As I said before, we will cover this in another episode at a later date because they are not the simplest of things, but we can give you a brief overview thanks to our assistants. So what we do is go back into the user interface, select the trunk we've just set up, so the provider, click on Edit, and then here we have inbound and outbound calls. Okay, so we're going to start with inbound calls to give you an idea. And what we've got here is we've got the central and we've got extensions here. These are the 2 rules we have set up. So if a call is coming in, doesn't matter what the source is, but the destination is our switchboard, so the 00, as I talked about earlier. Because we've only got one extension, it's going to be transferred onto my extension, the 100. Okay. Now, this is where I was talking about the placeholder with the number 2. On extensions, again, inbound call, doesn't matter from where it's coming from, but we have our destination, okay? And our destination is the originating number plus the extension codes. The XX is the extension code, and the underscore signifies it's a placeholder within asterisk scripting and so on, but more on that later on, okay? And this rule here is just basically saying it's going to transfer the call from our originating number to the extension. So if I had the extension 10, it would come to me. If it was 20, it would come to, yeah, the person using 20, okay? Moving on to outbound calls. Again, we have the standard setup here, thanks to the assistant. And as I talked about earlier with the incoming calls with the prefix having 0, in our system, we have to have the 0 as the outgoing prefix. So before we can dial an outside line, we have to dial 0. This is set up automatically for us in this system. And again, it doesn't matter about the source because it's us. And the destination, again, it doesn't matter, so there's nothing there. But what's important is the caller ID number, okay? And this image here, you can see we've got the 991, which is our area code. And then we have our base number, the 296670. And then behind we have another placeholder for the caller ID, and this is our extension number. So if I'm calling from my extension on this system, the 100, it will be transmitted with the outgoing call, and the person who's receiving the call will see that I've called from the extension 100. So if it was 10, it would be 10. If it was 20, it would be 20, so on and so on. Pretty clear, self-explanatory for that part. Okay, so that's that part done. We're now ready to test up our system, and for that I have a soft phone here, which you can see, and just to quickly go back to our users that you saw last time, I've got me here on the 100, okay, and hopefully my colleague Jan, who's our film technician, will be able to give me a call, and you'll be able to see it come through here live. And there you go, you can see it coming through now. Now, of course, to avoid any sound feedback and whatever, I'm going to decline this call because I don't really want to give you an earache and so on. Okay, so that's it for the basic telephoning. And in one of our previous episodes, we set up a client and so on. And when we are using the clients in action, it will show up in our call lists and so on and so on. So that's it for today's episode. If you need any more information, please refer to the MobyDick School. Thanks very much for watching. Until next time, goodbye.